Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much for joining us on another webinar. I'm grateful to Senator Mushahid Hussain Sayyid, Chairman, Senate Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and Chairperson, Pak-China Institute, and the Lieutenant General Retired Talim Masood Sahab, Zoon Ahmad Khan, researcher and analyst from BRI Strategy Institute, Tsinghua University, Beijing, and Dr. Sumaira Imran, professor, faculty member, researcher, analyst from National Defense University. And we have some other participants as well. And thank you very much. Recently, we have seen escalation between China and India on Galwan Valley in Ladakh. And it is very rare between India and China going to such a level where 20 soldiers of Indian army were killed. And it was not in shooting. It was like just they were beaten to death. And over the years, we have seen that China has been very lenient and very friendly with the neighborhoods to resolve their issues, not in the region, but globally as well. They were sorting out their issues. But this escalation has given us a little, some point to ponder that what would be damaging to the patience of China in relation to India's escalation. And China said that China entered into their part of territory and offered some, undue intervention over there, and that escalated the entire things. And today we will be discussing the escalation between China and India and its impact in the region and to the global peace as well, because this seems to be more than escalation. It seems to be a little bit more strategic sort of things, or like emerging future scenario for the region. I don't know what could be, but it is just apprehensions, and just we can presume what could be happening in the near future in the region. We will start with Senator Mushahid Hussain Sayyid Sahab, and then we will go to Lieutenant General Talat Masood Sahab. Then we will have Zoon Ahmad Khan, and finally we will have some word with, from Dr. Sumaira Imran. Initially, all panelists will speak for 10 minutes, followed by question and answers. Either I would be asking or the other participants from the audience, whatever you call it. Senator Mushahid Hussain Sayyid Sahab, your take on the situation.
Thank you so much, Munir Sahab, and Assalamu alaikum to all the other participants and the viewers. In the name of the Almighty, the Lord of all mankind, and I really appreciate your very proactive initiative on various issues which are of topical importance, not just for Pakistan and for the region. And as you rightly mentioned, that the recent development on the China-India border has important strategic ramifications, not just for Pakistan, not just for South Asia, but the world at large. And in my brief introductory remarks, I'd like to just place the context, very brief historical context, and then also mention the geopolitical context, the roots of the current crisis, and what can be the possible implications for Pakistan, for South Asia, for the Kashmir issue, and for the region. First of all, I think when we talk of history, I think history is something which is a constant reminder of the present and the future. Let us look at the worldview of both India and China. And that's really important. On the issues of borders and boundaries. For India, it has always been since the days of Nehru, they saw themselves as the successor to the British Imperial Raj. And they saw themselves in a larger than life role. And this was Nehru's perception also. He saw India as the natural successor to the British Raj because of its size, because of the history of legacy of colonialism. And he also felt that India is the natural leader, not just of South Asia, but he saw it of Asia, of non-alignment and so forth. So that is an imperial mindset almost when it comes to that. And they said that all the borders that they inherited from the British were the correct ones. And that imperial mindset now has been reinforced, unfortunately, by an ideological mindset of Mr. Modi and the RSS, which are ruling India now. As Arundhati Roy, the eminent Indian writer, said in her famous article of August 15th, 2019, soon after the annexation of occupied Kashmir, silence is the loud sound that RSS today is the state in India. This is Arundhati Roy. So that ideological mindset sees itself in a very aggressive light and a very intrusive light vis-a-vis smaller and bigger neighbors of India. So that's where India is coming from. When we talk of China, China also has a certain history. And that history is based on what is termed as the century of humiliation for China. It started in 1840 from the Opium Wars, when China's sovereignty, when China's territorial integrity was undermined. China had spheres of influence of the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Japan. And if you go to Shanghai today, even they will take you to the museum where they said there were British clubs or the French clubs or the American clubs. They said Chinese and dogs not allowed. And the jurisdiction was not China on their own territory. It was if somebody committed a crime, say those citizens, they were tried by their respective laws of their countries. An American judge would try an American, not a Chinese. So that was the century of humiliation from 1840, when the Opium War started, till 1949, when China established the People's Republic under Chairman Mao. And Chairman Mao announced on 1st October, the Chinese nation has stood up. So that is the context. So Chinese are very, very sensitive also about their territorial integrity, their sovereignty, whether it's South China Sea, whether it's Taiwan, whether it's Hong Kong, whether Tibet, Xinjiang, and whether it's their border with China, with India. Now coming to the border situation, this is roughly 3,488 kilometers long. This is called the Line of Actual Control, LAC, which is neither delineated on a map nor demarcated on the ground. So this is, remember, this is a still to be a settled issue. And that is extremely important to understand. And the last offer which was made by China was in 1960 to settle it, when Premier Zhou Enlai went to India in April 1960, he talked to Nehru, and he offered that Arunachal Pradesh, which is now a state of India, which China claims and calls it South Tibet, that should become part of China, and Aksai Chin, which is about 33,000 square kilometers, which is the area close to Ladakh, which unites Tibet with Xinjiang province. And there's a famous highway, North 219, that links Xinjiang with Tibet. That should be part of China. That offer was turned down by Nehru, and it was offered from 1960 to 1980, and it continued to be turned down. So there was one opportunity which was lost, and I think the recent article by my friend Sudhindra Kulkarni in The Wire gives the history of that border dispute. And if you talk of the 1962 war, because this is the most significant development in India-China relations since the 62 war, in fact, more ferocious, more vicious than the 62 war. The best book on this 1962 war is Neville Maxwell, an Australian journalist who was based in Oxford. He died 2 years ago. He wrote the book, India's China War, and that's worth reading for. So that is the historical context which is important to understand when we talk about border. And now what is the some geopolitical context, very briefly. We are seeing the rise of China as an important global power, and the shift in the balance of economic and political power from the West to the East. That is one context. Then we are seeing the retrenchment of American influence in most of the Middle East and the region of South Asia. Withdrawal from Iraq, withdrawal from Afghanistan, withdrawal from Syria. And Trump has announced no more, he was even talking to the Taliban, he's announced that no more wars after 9/11, no more boots on the ground. So there's a retrenchment taking place. That's another reality. Or even retreat of American power, military power in this region, which we have known after 9/11. And the third important reality is that after his election in May 9, 2019, Mr. Modi and the BJP have adopted a rather aggressive posture towards their neighbors. Their relations with Pakistan, there have been threats across the line of control, bombardment, so forth. They have a problem with Nepal. And so this has been aggravated, accentuated. So, and now with China also, which is very much there. And their opposition to the initiative of the Belt and Road, which is the single most important developmental and diplomatic initiative in the 21st century, of which CPEC is the centerpiece. So that context is extremely important. Now, when we come to the roots of the present crisis, which started on 5th of May, what are the roots? The roots are on August 5, 2019, when India announced the annexation of occupied Kashmir into Indian territory, and they then bifurcated the state of Jammu and Kashmir into two union territories to be directly administered by Delhi. Jammu and Kashmir, occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and Ladakh. And Ladakh is disputed with China. So they also declared a union territory. And on top of that, there were irresponsible statements made by the Indian leadership, especially Mr. Amit Shah, the Home Minister, who is the right-hand man of Mr. Modi, and who is also involved in the Gujarat massacre with Mr. Modi. And he's the Home Minister now, and Secretary General of the party, or the President of the party also, BJP. He said that India is not content with that. India will take back its territory. And he named Azad Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan, and Aksai Chin. He said Aksai Chin in the Parliament of India, that this is Indian territory, we'll take it back. That raised it. And then, in that whole period, the Indian side has built a new road. It's called the Darpuk, Shiok is the river, and Daulat Beg Oldie Road, DS BDO Road, 255 kilometers along the line of actual control. So, and that leads to Siachen. And it's not 10-15 kilometers from the Karakoram Pass. So it's very important that strategic highway was built. And that was inaugurated last year by Mr. Rajnath Singh, the Defense Minister of India. And on top of that, in November 2019, the Indian side published new maps in which not just Pakistani territory, Chinese territory and Nepalese territory was also claimed. November 2019. So that context is extremely important to understand. And I think this reason why I say this is very vicious is that this was on the night of 15th June, 8 hours of hand-to-hand combat with the spikes-studded, batons, with steel pipes, physically, and it was a brutal contest. 8 hours, and that's a lot. And these are a lot of casualties. No shot was fired, no firearms were used, but the intensity has been very. And those of you who have seen the videos of the May 5th and the May 9th incidents also, where there was boxing matches almost, and there were a lot of injuries, there's a certain viciousness and an anger on both sides. And you can see that after 15th of June, the Indian side was shaken up, stunned into silence. Those who speak of surgical strikes, who speak of teaching a lesson, for 24 hours, Modi did not say a word. The defense minister did not say a word. It happened on Monday, June 15th night. And on Wednesday, they came up with a very soft and muted response. And somebody asked the BJP Secretary General, why are you so soft? He said, this is not Pakistan, this is China. So look at the attitude, the mindset is very clear. So this, I think, is extremely important. Now, what are the implications? In my view, 3 implications are very important. Number one, the Kashmir issue has now become a trilateral issue. It's no longer Pakistan and India. Of course, with the Kashmiri people as the principal stakeholder, but it includes now China as a stakeholder. Because when India occupied Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir on 5th of August, you remember on 7th of August, the Chinese Foreign Ministry had said this state action of India is unacceptable. So willy-nilly, because of the short-sightedness of the Indian side, China has been injected as a direct stakeholder, as a player into this border issues. So it's not just about Pakistan and India and the Kashmiri people, it's China also. So it's a trilateral issue. And I think there's a certain sense of satisfaction in occupied Kashmir also. You saw the tweet of the daughter of Mahbooba Mufti, Iltija. She said, now the Chinese will come and liberate us from the Indian side. So this was, and these are people who are part of the pro-Indian group in occupied Kashmir. So there is this focus on Kashmir, and Kashmir issues ambit has been enlarged. Secondly, it is also a sense of satisfaction, frankly, I'll say, for people in Pakistan, for even Nepal, even Bangladesh. I was talking to some of my friends in Bangladesh also, because Bangladesh was affected by the Citizenship Amendment Act, because it discriminated against the Muslims of Bangladesh also. And they were also, and the biggest pro-Kashmiri demonstration in South Asia was held in October 2019 in Dhaka. 3 lakh people took place. So there's a sense of satisfaction that India has got a taste of their own medicine. They've been taught a lesson by the Chinese side. And that this arrogance, the hubris of India has been shattered. And I think that is extremely important. The third important thing is, in my view, when we talk of the ramifications, strategic ramifications, which Mr. Munir also mentioned, I think this is the opening shot of a new Cold War.
Yeah.
And I think that is the first opening shot of a new Cold War, because the United States has now officially declared China as their enemy. This has come in their national security strategy. They say China and Russia are more dangerous than Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. And if you remember, last month, the White House produced a document called Strategic Review towards Relations with the People's Republic of China. They've mentioned, and they named the Communist Party of China. So they want to attack China like they did the Soviet Union also. So we are seeing the opening shot of this new Cold War, where America is garnering allies in Asia. India is one of them. Japan is one of them. Australia is one of them. Maybe Vietnam is one of them, into an anti-China coalition and preparing for a new Cold War. And this was referred to by the Chinese Foreign Minister also on 24th of May, because on COVID-19 also the American side is attacked. First, they appreciated China. President Trump appreciated it. And then they attacked China on COVID-19. And they've been putting the pressure. I may add on this issue of this border clash. Mr. Modi had 2 conversations with his allies. On 2nd June, he talked to Trump. Trump discussed the China-India dispute. They did not formally support them, except a statement of 21st of May by Alice Wells, who was then the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. She's now retired. She supported China and talked of Chinese aggression. And later on, Pompeo then gave a statement recently that we expect our regrets on the Chinese, on this clash and the killing of Indian soldiers. He expressed his condolences. But there was no official expression of solidarity. And Modi also talked to the Prime Minister of Australia, Mr. Morrison, and he also did not express any solidarity. So the way things stand, I think that this conflict is not going away. The wounds are very deep. One last word, the Chinese side has been downplaying it. Their media, otherwise, they have not been making too much noise. But I've been watching the Indian media. All hell has broken loose. They are still in a state of shock. They don't know how to handle it. And they also realize that they cannot take on China. This is a bigger humiliation than 1962 also, because this is not the China of 62 when China was a very weak country.
Yeah.
Now, and after 50 years, India was talking of strong India, shining India, rising India, and that did not take place. Yeah. So I feel that it's an interesting evolving situation. What China has done to India, it has finally given, I would say in my view, some strategic space to Pakistan, a geopolitical breather. Because of Afghanistan, where we are helping the Americans have the peace process and facilitating the talks with Taliban, and because of the American elections, the pressure from Washington is off. The do more thing is no longer there. Yeah. Then because of Modi's own policies vis-a-vis smaller neighbors, they are all upset with India. That is there. Then because of CPEC, which has given us strategic space as a hub of regional connectivity, especially vis-a-vis Central Asian republics of Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. And also our relations have improved with Afghanistan. I think that has also given us strategic space as economic level. So I think we have to leverage that, improve our relations with Russia also, improve our relations with Iran also. And I think Pakistan has a breather for the next couple of years to do that. I do not anticipate any, people are saying a false flag operation against Pakistan. I do not anticipate that. Okay. I feel that on the contrary, what India will do is raw-inspired hybrid war. And this has already begun. You can see last week in Sindh, in Gotki, Ladkana, and Karachi, there were synchronized attacks on ranges through IED, through grenades, and through bombs. And that is likely to increase. And they would like to put pressure through information warfare, through psychological warfare, and hybrid warfare. Okay. But Pakistan, I think, has to be on their guard. We have a strong army, mashallah. And I don't see any quick normalization of relations with India. That India is very angry, and you can see the recent attitude has even become worse on that. Okay. So on that note, I'd like to close, and I would like to thank Mr. Munir for that initiative, and I look forward to hearing from other colleagues and participants. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Senator Mushahid Hussain Sayyid Saab, for a wonderful take on it. Now I would like to go to General Talat Masood Sahab. When I have written a piece, none else, it's China. Mushahid Saab, because it is like the same thing that I have pointed out in my piece, that we are entering into a new sort of Cold War in the region, and this time Pakistan will not be the US proxy, but India will be the US proxy in the region now.
The roles are reversed.
Yeah, the role is reversed. And in this context, I would like to go to General Masood Saab, Talat Masood Saab.
General Masood Saab is a thinking general, a democratic general, and a man full of ideas whom I look forward to hearing.
Thank you so much.
In this context, that is building up in the region, what do you have to say about it? And what should be Pakistan's role in the emerging scenario? General Saab.
Well, actually, coming after Senator Mushahid Hussain, you know, it's very, very difficult to say anything because his talk was so comprehensive and excellent talk. It covered entirely everything that, in fact, one would have liked to say. Well, it was much beyond what one would have even thought of saying because his knowledge is not comparable with mine. He is much far more experienced. So I'm very grateful that, you know, we learned a lot from him. And we always do that. And that's a great thing that, you know, you have in the Senate such capable people and in the country. And I'm glad that, you know, an organization like yours also promotes, you know, thinking of very solid thinking about very serious issues which face Pakistan externally and internally. Now, coming to the subject, I would really start off by saying that, you know, India at the moment will lie low as far as China is concerned. I think that silence of 24 or 48 hours of India spoke volumes about how India is going to deal with China. I think what they will do is that they will lie low. They will continue to have a very aggressive policy towards China, in which they would have the support of the US, but they realize that the power potential of the two countries, the gap is far, far too much. And India, I think it is anything between 3-1 to 4-1, or even in some areas, 5-1. And it is no point for India at this point of time to take on China. And you really, from their statements, their response, and also subsequent policy that they will be adopting, you will find that this would remain the policy. Although I think their aims towards China will be somewhat very similar to what their aim would be towards Pakistan and towards the region. But the policy at the moment would be different. Now, coming to the fact that what would then India do if it cannot do anything against China? My view is that they will continue to focus on Pakistan. And the reason why they will continue to focus on Pakistan, because it's a bully on the block. It is a country which thinks that, you know, relatively a weak country in that sense, that, you know, obviously India is a much larger country, much larger resources. Pakistan is relatively weak in that sense. So keep the pressure on Pakistan. And it has several sort of advantages as far as the Modi's government is concerned. It diverts the Indian government's present predicament as far as the economy is concerned, as far as its failures on China are concerned, as far as its you know, reduced sort of support within India and its Kashmir policy is concerned. So it's a very good diversion as far as India is concerned to keep the pressure on Pakistan. So I think Pakistan understands that. Our military leadership fully understands, and I think our civilian leadership too. And they are fully prepared that if they do make any adventurous move, we are prepared to sort of take them on. So I think this point we need to sort of remember that whereas they are unlikely to sort of, I agree with Senator Musharraf Hussain, they're unlikely to take any sort of risk as far as Pakistan is concerned, because they are aware that the line of control is fully, you know, alert. I mean, our soldiers are fully alert and will repulse any action of the Indians. Yet, I think they will not probably go to that extent, but they will keep the pressure. They will also keep the pressure politically and diplomatically, you know, at the global level, at the regional level. But that would be difficult because, as Senator Musharraf Hussain has just recently reminded us again, that you know, the relationship with all the neighbors is in a mess. And countries like Nepal, which would not have liked to take India along, and even those areas which are not in their occupation, they have now claimed it. So look, it has given a lot of strength to countries like Nepal because of their attitude towards Pakistan and towards China. That means, so I would now say that, well, probably I'm finishing my time limit. So I will close here by saying that Pakistan has to be very careful as far as India is concerned. And what is more important for Pakistan is to internally consolidate, have a foreign and a defense policy which has the full support of the people of Pakistan. And this is the best way of deterring Indian aggression today or in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Talib. Very valid point you have raised that because the India would be, because they cannot attack again and again to China, but Pakistan being weaker and lenient as well, because we are very peace loving. Sometimes peace becomes your weakness as well, because we don't want to escalate any sort of tensions, but resolve everything through diplomatic process and dialogue, and that is tend to be a weakness for us. With this, I would like to go again. I would like to go to Zoon Ahmed Khan, Beijing. I have introduced yourself already that you are working with the researcher analyst as a BRI Strategic Institute at Tsinghua University, and you also work with media as an analyst. What do you think, like as the very eminent speakers have already mentioned, that there is a cold war is in the offing and it's emerging and it is also some repercussions on BRI. How do you see it?
Okay, so first of all, Munir Saab, thank you so much for inviting me. After Senator Musharraf and General Talib, I really think there is very little that I can contribute at all. If anything, maybe I can just try to give a very primordial point of view. Being in Beijing, being part of that experience when the incident, obviously the 6th May incident and then 15 June escalation, how things were perceived in China to a certain extent. I think I would like to comment a little bit on that. And of course, as you rightly mentioned, and Senator Mujahid also mentioned, that the Belt and Road Initiative is a very significant, perhaps the biggest development in the sense of how to bring countries closer. So a lot of people don't understand the BRI. Some countries feel threatened by it. Specifically, India has been the only country to oppose the Belt and Road Initiative, but actually from China's point of view. And this is something that they have consistently communicated to India as well, that the BRI is only a vision to increase the connectivity and to solve the issues that we all face as humanity, to see beyond the differences that exist and work on things that we have in common. So I think in that sense, we also see that not only has China promoted and proposed the Belt and Road vision, which is inspired by the Silk Road, which connected Eurasia, but they also have welcomed India as well as Pakistan in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, an organization that I also work very closely with in Beijing. The Shanghai Spirit, as we call it, has to do with the same, to solve the issues of extremism, terrorism, and separatism that multiple countries in the region face, Central Asia, South Asia, China, and Russia together face, to solve them through creating human bonds, through cultural cooperation, economic cooperation, and trust building. So I think the first thing that I would like to point out is that China's posture towards not only India, but other countries in general, has been one of promoting goodwill, has been one of promoting economic connectivity and cultural connectivity. When we look at the first responses that were observed in Beijing, one thing is the official response, which I think anyone who observes China knows that that response is always well thought out, guarded, and the intention is really to reduce escalation and to reduce misunderstanding, even if it exists. The official response was, of course, very well thought out, and at the same time, it was also, I wouldn't say a warning, but it hinted that India must also respect the mutually agreed upon principles and the dialogue that both countries have achieved in the past 3 years post the Doklam. But apart from the official, we see that the media outlets, and most significantly the social media, was very lukewarm, was very mild. You see, in China, if we look at the average Chinese person, some people who are not familiar with how international issues are discussed in China would think that maybe people don't have access to information. But this is false. And actually, young Chinese people, they follow international developments, they follow what's happening with respect to India, the region, the US, etc. Their opinion on India, now this is something very important to understand, that their perspective is that India is a developing country, is an Asian country, is a country that is being used by the United States for their interests. And we look at that vis-a-vis the Quad, the way the post-COVID and during COVID rhetoric emerged in India. So their opinion is, the overall pulse in China, not just in Beijing, but generally of the Chinese people, is that we can cooperate with India, but India must also respect this sentiment. So I think this, Percy, is very telling, because we all saw how on international platforms, on social media, Indian scholars or scholars of Indian origin worldwide, they were very aggressively propagating this perspective. We saw that post Balakot as well. So many false, we live in a post-truth era, so really it's very difficult to tell the truth from the falsehood, but with time it emerges. And we saw that that same aggression was being observed, was being utilized by India in general to promote an anti-China sentiment, to propagate their side of the story. And in the meantime, China's response still remained calm, cool-headed, and offering India to communicate effectively. And I feel like this is something very important to not only notice, but it is also telling in the sense that other South Asian countries, that both Senator Mujahid and General Talat also mentioned, that in general, India's attitude towards its neighbors is something not just known within the neighborhood, not just Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and of course Pakistan, but China has also been observing this attitude. And globally, we know that India could use better goodwill within its own neighborhood. and then their attitude towards China. So I feel like despite these developments, despite India's knee-jerk reaction, China still is trying to guide the Indian people to remain cool-headed. But it becomes very difficult because the anti-China sentiment in India among the Indian people is not just didn't just erupt when the 15th June incident happened, or it didn't just erupt when we saw the Doklam issue. But it is something that has many facets to it. For instance, the trade deficit with China is something that comes up repeatedly. And we see that every time, for example, when China was the epicenter of COVID, there were two reactions in India. Number one, that they thought they can replace China as the industrial hub. And then number two, they thought that other international firms, other international companies, Western companies can relocate their businesses to India, and they wanted to reduce their reliance, on China, and they wanted to reduce their reliance on China. Then we also saw that in April, India came up with the new FDI rules to limit strategic takeovers by neighboring countries. This was also targeted towards China. So as far as the economy is concerned, this boycott China movement, then this concept that China is somehow China's Belt and Road vision threatens India. This is also misguided. These differences, and then of course the line of actual control, which remains an issue that started from the time the British Raj ended. So these are all issues that limit the degree to which China's vision for India can be manifested. And I think maybe some basic perspectives from China validate the point of view that China is a peace-loving country. China is a country that is trying to communicate with India, but India repeatedly, by participating in Quad, by mimicking the American rhetoric, anti-China rhetoric, and through also by its attitude towards increasing Belt and Road connectivity in the neighboring countries, is not reciprocating in any way. In fact, it is provoking. So I think this was my perspective, just to give an idea of what India's posture is. And just in closing, I think one of the things in Beijing that is being discussed is perhaps it is possible to move forward in a positive way. Even though this incident happened, China and India's issues and misperceptions remain deep rooted, but Beijing still feels that it's possible to compartmentalize this and cooperate with India. But let's see how India responds in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoon Ahmed Khan, for sharing your thoughts. And definitely, BRI is becoming bone of contention between India and China. And I don't know why India is feeling so threatened that they are trying to. And secondly, it is really maybe very difficult for China to replace, for India to replace China in the region and globally. But when the Cold War is being manifested and would be used against China in the region, what would be the implications? Dr. Samira Imran teaches at National Defense University, and she specializes on US-China relations. And that's why I requested her to be here, because the emerging scenario where US will not itself be in the region, as Mushahid Hussain Sayyid Saab and General Talha Saab said, that they want no war and no more conflicts wherever United States is engaged directly. So in this context, Dr. Samira Imran, what do you think, the China-US relations that has been entered into a sort of from economic conflict to sort of Cold War? How do you see the future coming into the region, and how it would be taking on to the global peace? Dr. Samira.
Thank you so much. it is always very disadvantageous to speak as the last speaker, and also to speak in front of such intellectual giants as Hussain.
Dr. Sabha, before you proceed further, I would request the camera थोड़ा सा जरा दूर करें ताकि ये frame थोड़ा ज़्यादा बेहतर हो जाएगा. Yes, it's good. It's good. Wonderful. बस
it is always disadvantageous to be the last speaker, and also to speak in front of intellectual giants as of the caliber as General Talat Masood and Mushahid Hussain Sayyid Saab. And here I find as well misunderstanding on the part of the topic that was allotted to me. I was assigned a topic that was to speak more on regional implications of the Sino-Indian conflict. So being an academician and a researcher, my analysis would be more in the cause and effect analysis, and it is in that context that I have written a few points which I would like to share with you, and bear up with me for a while, for a longer duration, which has been allotted to other speakers. So we find various analytical debates, several perspectives and counter perspectives on the nature, intent, and future implications of the border standoff and its implications for regional stability and global security. So in order to understand, develop a hermeneutic understanding, a thorough analysis on both sides of the debate will develop clarity. So my argument is that basically the border standoff between India and China has dragged India into a catch-22 situation. It has reduced it to the stature of a low-key power in the regional parity. Because either it has to accept the status quo, or else it needs to escalate the crisis, the standoff as such. So with me, I have sorted out various bilateral, regional, and global factors that have triggered the Sino-Indian border standoff. So first, it must be understood that, and this is the key point with me, that China's contentions and border claims in the Himalayas, they bear equal potency to its strategic claims in the South China Sea, on Taiwan and its maritime islands against the Philippines or Japan. So in terms of the significance and stature, its border claim in the Himalayas is of equal significance. China has regarded its disputes as unsettled agenda from the past, awaiting resolution. Beijing may put historic claims to the back burner for a while for the sake of trade dividends or corporate interest, but it will never lay its hands off to the border claims. So Chinese grievances, as Mushahid Hussain Sayyid Saab has indicated, they relate to the revisionist claims to the McMahon line, which they believe that were negotiated, were imposed upon China, and relate to the legacy of its maltreatment at the hands of Allied powers. So at the domestic level, I find that it is one may link Beijing's border reassertions to Xi Jinping's nationalistic drive, which has found an equaling match in Modi's expression of self-projection on the bandwagon of Hindutva. So Xi Jinping works presently on Mao's legacy to work on the prudent maxim of right is what you claim as your own. So hence Xi's loud overtures in Hong Kong, in South China Sea, along the McMahon line, and the line of actual control in its Chin can be seen. At the global level, what we find is that the recent standoff has reflected the teleological end to the process of China's rise and its achievement of great power status in a way. With Russia on its side, Beijing seeks to offset India against its imprudent tilt, or what it regards as leaning towards Washington. Whether Beijing remains successful in pulling India out or pushing it further to the US camp remains to be seen. So however, Indian treaty with Australia and participation in Quads has surely provided the incentive for triggering this Sino-Indian border skirmishes. The Indian-Australia treaty evidently has granted permission to use military bases, and it has aimed to strengthen Quads in countering China's projection of sea power in the South China Sea. So China's assertion of new status on the international arena may require its disengagement from petty irritants with regional states, its trade, however, its trade, investment, and multi-institutional engagement with India in forums such as BRICS, Asian Infrastructure Bank, and SCO reveal the complexity of mutual stakes in the present dispute. Also, among the regional factors, we find that China's assertive play on the Himalayan front falls in line with Chinese otherwise expansionist designs in the Indian Ocean, with coastal South Asia, Indo-Pacific littoral rim, and Asia Pacific. So in the recent episode, China has blamed India for crossing the LAC and entering Chinese territory in Aksai Chin. And any attempt to clarify LAC's alignments have stalled since 2002. So we cannot say as to claims, we cannot verify the authenticity of the claims of incursion by both sides. So China has physically secured 3 to 4 kilometers territory in Galwan, which links Ladakh in the west and Aksai Chin in the east. It has captured another 8 to 10 kilometers area along the northern bank of Pangong between finger 5 to finger 8. So both the ministries have termed, Chinese ministry has claimed the Galwan Valley is Chinese territory along the LSA, which India has termed as exaggerated and untenable. So a major factor has been the changed status of Galwan, in fact, as union territory following Indian abrogation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir. Indian move, in fact, created India's first Buddhist majority union territory, incorporating parts of Xinjiang and Tibet, and Beijing viewed this as a move to damage China's sovereignty. So Sino-Indian reference initiatives have caused threat perception, leading to the security dilemma. Indian Border Roads Organization construction of 61 roads has added China's increased threat perception. Indian construction of 255 kilometers, the Shayok Daulat Beg Oldie Road, runs parallel to LAC and extends up to the Karakoram base, which has aggravated Chinese fear of Indian reclaim of Aksai Chin. Now, Aksai Chin, as Syed Mushahid Hussain Syed has explained, it provides the link between Tibet to Xinjiang. So that is why China's road ventures in Doklam in 2017 were also aimed at aiming at a strategic edge to reach Siliguri corridor. So, which is India's chicken neck to its states in the northeast. So as China occupied 640 square kilometers in eastern Ladakh in 2013, so Indian interests lay in reversing China's military infrastructure advantages to deter territorial aversions in the future. And China will continue to raise the cost of Indian attempts at doing so. Among other high to low key factors may have been Indian Interior Minister Amit Singh's ambitious declaration in the parliament to recapture Aksai Chin. And this point has also been highlighted by Dr. Syed Mushahid Hussain Syed. So just as the other speaker has mentioned as to Noor Ahmed, that there has been China's Indian insistence in World Health Organization forum to investigate the origins of coronavirus pandemic, which China fought to block, has been another factor that caused displeasure. Now, what are the implications for the region? That's the basic point. In fact, Indian military overtures with brigade-sized strength, aided by airstrip in DBO, that is Daulat Bagh Oldie, grants a strategic edge to New Delhi near the Karakoram highway. And lying just at a distance of 10 kilometers from Indian mortar and artillery fire range, China has sought to prevent Indian advantage in the region. In a bid to secure CPAC and the key route to Central Asia, China control point of point 14 aims at dominating the heights overlooking the road to win massive operational advantage over India. So Chinese westward expansion in Dapsang may arise Indian suspicion of LAC and LOC collision of interest resting on Sino-Indian strategic ties. And also we see that if we view historically, the implication can be seen that the Sino-Indian standoff may dovetail on arms race, foreign intervention, and military adventurism in South Asia. India's bid to avail Su-400 from Russia and its defense minister's visit, 4-day visit to Russia is the case in point. Similarly, we find that the latest episode has strengthened Indian reliance. It may strengthen Indian reliance in the Quad's alliance partnership. India may bolster its foreign strategic partnership with France, Australia, and Japan, while leveraging security ties with the US. Optimizing a more focused and resilient Indo-US strategic partnership, Indian defense engagements may include enhancement of defense trade, advancement of Indian capacity and capability, deepening of policy and planning coordination, and improvement of information sharing and optimization of bilateral military exercises. So
Okay,
the
Dr. Sahaba,
standoff force.
will you please conclude with some remarks?
Just 2 more points, 4 more points. The standoff may force India to strengthen its military footprint, including artillery, armor, and aviation units, and man these in forward positions across the LAC. This will imply Indian reduced capability to make military moves against Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Kashmir. Overall, China's move in Ladakh has frustrated Indian plans to attack Azad Jammu and Kashmir. That's a good news for Pakistan. While reviving Kashmir's international credentials, it has upheld at the same time its own position as a legitimate stakeholder in the dispute. So it has neutralized Indian threat to CPEC. It has neutralized the threat to Gilgit-Baltistan, and on a wider scale, it has neutralized Indian opposition to Belt and Road Initiative. So the standoff puts a dent on Indian regional hegemony, as is seen in the form of Nepal's release of border map. And this point has also been highlighted. But this is typical of the smallest states' behavior. They have always sought to rely on states outside South Asia to diffuse the Indian hegemony within South Asia. So China has provided a better option in this regard. So the Global Times warning to India not to miscalculate China has urged India to abstain from military adventurism, and it has implications also for Siachen as well. And as this area offers a juncture between LOC and LAC. So Sino-Indian standoff has echoed well to Washington ears and has prevented it to pursue China's containment policy along the latest periphery. However, whether China links or has linked revoking of Article 370 or Article 35A in Indian occupied Kashmir to Galwan vacation, that is yet to be seen. India's great ambitions are foiled in the face of the border standoff with China. So it's the Sino-Indian power imbalance involves a great disparity between the two, and Indian derailment of relations has occurred in its periphery, and South Asia may witness acceleration of many of its geopolitical trends, which Mushahid Hussain Sayyid Sabha has already highlighted in the form of the sleeping cells reactivation. And we also find that China and India have, although managed the desire to moderate competition in Sri Lanka, in the interest of development and trade relations, the standoff has put stable India-China relations as a distant prospect. So Stephen Watt's logic of balancing against the threat perception has prevailed for now, and we may expect a further downturn in Pakistan-India relations and also in China-India relations. So security challenges for India in the Himalayas may scare India off for the time being for China, keeping it away from anti-China cap and from pursuing any strategy in the South China Sea. So however, any limited war at the border will make China vulnerable at the same time in the South China Sea. So I would conclude that there are good news as such. The good news is a neutralization of the threat as such, Indian imminent threat to Azad Jammu Kashmir, and as well as to CPEC, which has been neutralized for the time being. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Saba, for your detailed deliberation on the implications and the context of the escalation. We had a little bit conversation with Anwar Iqbal Saab last evening, because he said like he won't be able to join 1 p.m. Pakistan Standard Time, because at that time there will be like 4 a.m. In Washington. He raised a couple of points as a perspective that is being discussed in Washington, D.C. If I'm allowed, I can share with you. There's like the think tanks has taken it as the first shot, as Mushahid Saab said, towards the beginning of the Cold War. America does not want their presence, and even it's not a sort of gut jod of India and United States to go against, but certainly India is trying to be more proactive, to be more pro-American in the region, showing their power against China. Secondly, Anwar Iqbal said, though America is trying to curtail the economic and trade activities and its trade and economic volume globally, but cannot stop the import of PPEs in America. And the entire America was flooded with the China-made PPEs, and they were used everywhere. And the think tanks believe that China cannot be curtailed for their economic and trade globally until there is a substitute to a cheap labor and the massive, mass production of different products. And thirdly, they said like implication, Anwar Iqbal said it would have implication for the region, but with a little bit humiliation, India would like to curtail itself from such kind of interventions or initiatives, or what you call it, adventurism in the region. With the strengthening of China and taking on to India on this misadventurism, Pakistan would be benefited, and it would curtail, India's penetration as a superpower or hero of South Asia. So this was the basically 4 or 5 points that I could draw from the conversation of Anwar Iqbal. With this, I would like to open this forum to other participants if they have any question to ask the panelists. Raise your hand or unmute your. Ji Sarfraz Saab. Sorry if I recognize you. Yeah. Unmute kare. Mike. Ji bataiye.
Kind of you for taking up such an important thing. I'm lucky to participate today and hear Mushahid Saab, General Saab. Lekin I'm waiting for one thing out of there. Everybody feels that this has helped Pakistan to diffuse, but it has not helped Pakistan to diffuse. India is charged emotionally with the Tatwa. They cannot retreat from that stand. So Pakistan is in danger. Anytime in India can be act as adventurism to show their public that our weakness we have overcome. Pakistan should not take it easy. It has rather become more aggressively against Pakistan to show its partner also, look, we have achieved that target.
Okay, thank you. Do you have Minasa Mushai Saab?
Gee, thank you, Sarfraz sir, for your comment. I think that let's go back to 26th of February, Pulwama. That was the first time after 71 when India actually attacked Pakistan territory, because Balakot is part of Pakistan. It's not Azad Kashmir. It's not the line of control. They crossed the international border. They wanted to send a message that we can strike at will on Pakistan territory. And although they didn't attack any particular installation or people, no casualties, but within 24 hours, we hit back very hard, shot down 2 of their planes, captured their pilot Abhinandan, whom we returned as a goodwill gesture of 48 hours. And at that time, CNN asked me, this is last year, no, are we heading towards war? What will India do in retaliation? You have shot down their plane, you've humiliated India. I said, nothing is going to happen. He said, no, but I said, no, because India is, as General Talat Masood said, the bully on the block. And the bully on the block understands the language of force. If you blink before a bully, then they'll hit you harder. But if you stand firm and show that you have the will and the capacity to hit back aggression, then they back off. And they backed off. So I think that we have, mashallah, a lot of military strength also. Hybrid war, yes. Low intensity conflict, yes. Destabilization via raw, yes. And I think I still maintain we have got a strategic breather. They are very upset, even before the China clash, over Afghanistan. That Pakistan, they wanted to rope in America against us. That America, Trump should put pressure on Pakistan, which he was in 2017, no longer. Because under the doctrine of necessity, which is relevant in foreign affairs, they need Pakistan to promote a peace process, which Trump can sell in the elections in America. That look here, I brought peace to Afghanistan by withdrawing their troops. Although it's not that kind of peace, he's lost the war there. But Pakistan is a pivotal player in the region. And I think that our options have increased after the thrashing and the well-deserved teaching of a lesson by China to India. This is my humble opinion. And I feel that I gave the example of Pulwama because we had a direct confrontation with India. And we got the better out of that confrontation. And we saw the Indian response. So their problem is Muslim bashing at home and Pakistan bashing abroad. It's an ideological foreign policy, which is very different. And these people, their mindset, they believe in Akhand Bharat, greater India. They don't like the existence of Pakistan. They don't like Muslims. So I think we have to understand that. And we have to live with our neighbors. We hope a better sense will prevail, inshallah. After all, we want to have good relations with India. And we even offered them to join CPAC, join the Belt and Road Initiative. But Modi has his own problems, but his problems are increasing. He is doing more damage to India than any other leader in Indian history. And his response in COVID-19, his economy and so forth. And I feel that there are troubled times ahead for India. And of course, in the region also, a small country, Nepal, has stood up to India. It's the only other Hindu majority state in the world. And they have said, look here, we won't tolerate this bullying. So I think that times have changed. This is the 21st century. And size doesn't equal strength. If India feels just because they are larger in size, Nepal has shown the way. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have a question to the panelists. We have seen a different, on the different fronts, China is facing a lot of criticism on the freedom of expression and human rights as well, but China is always defending, but not according to the scale of criticism they are getting on. What is, most of the people say they are very reluctant to show off or like use media. Zoon, would you like to comment? Sitting in the Beijing, do you think like China is under-responding to such kind of issues being raised on the international forums and globally?
Nisab, I think the first thing to understand is that, in a sense, the Western criticism of China has to do with an overall posture, and it has to do with interest more than objective reality. So for instance, when China is being criticized for certain supposedly human rights violations, we look at the United States' own track record in our region, in the Middle East, etc. So to some extent, I think it's not just that China and the US necessarily are, that China is mishandling situations. It's not that, it's more that they benefit from this perspective on China, and this is a constant attack that is being levied on China on multiple international fora. The other thing is that English language medium has more influence in the world. We see that American propaganda, American media outlets have an influence on how developing countries cover issues to do with China. It has an influence how various other Europeans cover issues to do with China. So I think on one hand, we see that the language is very powerful. It has more impact. And on the other side, we see China that till very recently did not have any presence on supposedly international social media like Twitter, like Facebook. These are really the platforms where most of this rhetoric is being circulated. So I feel like, yes, China has changed a little bit, that we see now recently Chinese diplomats, Chinese official, like for instance, the Global Times, etc., their official media are also on social media platforms. They are putting out a certain perspective, but at the same time, maybe they have a long way to go relatively to be able to respond equally. And one of the things that we can do, perhaps, that China can do, which they are doing as part of the Belt and Road Initiative, is increase media collaboration with countries and actually help countries understand the Chinese point of view. It's the point of view that people have little awareness of. And this can increase with time, but for now, definitely the US and English-speaking, the English-speaking part of the world has more influence on global opinion.
General Talal Sahab, the same question. Why we don't see any aggressive public awareness campaign, or we call it a lobbying campaign for their against the Western and American propaganda? That's very limited, I think. A couple of statement comes and that's it, but we don't see any vigorous public awareness campaign on from China. Do you see?
Well, I think China takes a very long view of every serious problem that it faces, and especially, diplomatic problems with US and so on. So it sees its long-term interests. It is not interested in, and then you also have to understand that there is a very big difference between the society of China and the democratic countries. So I think this is also a perception that you cannot just wash away or think. You must keep that all the time at the back of your mind, in the sense that although China is essentially a communist country and the state has a lot of power and dictates policy and so on, yet China is also changing. We also have to keep that in mind. China today is not the same China that it was earlier. There is also a lot of criticism within China, which is a good thing that is happening. So the Chinese leadership today is also responding extremely well to the changes that are taking place within China, in that sense that it, when it realizes that the younger generation, the intellectuals and all, there is a certain level of criticism, or there is a certain level of departure from the official thinking, they don't come hard on them as they used to in the past. So there is a gradual evolution which is taking place in China, which we should also be cognizant of, and I think the world should be. So I think this pressure, I think both the speakers have explained it very well, that America uses that in order to belittle China, and the West uses that. At the same time, they themselves commit such horrendous acts, and they, when it comes to their strategic interests, they would go all along and align themselves with the most undemocratic and ruthless countries in the world, as history will bear with us.
Okay, thank you, General Masood Saab. Mushahid Saab, I have a question. If no other participant has any question.
There was one question for me from Preston. I just saw that.
Okay,
about
Gigi.
please you can ask the question about hybrid warfare. Yes, let me respond to that, then I respond to your question if it's okay.
Please go ahead.
He has said that whether hybrid warfare is likely to increase. I just saw it on the printout.
Okay, please, and you can respond. He has asked, you know.
Yes, I just want to comment on the earlier discussion we had, which is very instructive, which you had with Zoon and General Saab. It's very interesting that on China, I don't see much freedom of opinion or expression in the Western think tanks or the American think tanks. And very few balanced articles. But however, I did read one very good article, which I'd like to recommend to all of you, and I'd like to give the citation. This was an article written in Foreign Affairs in the January-February 2020 issue by Fareed Zakaria. And it's called The New China Scare. The New China Scare is how they're creating a scare about China in the American or the Washington establishment, which is the military establishment, the political establishment of both parties. And I think I would say it's worth reading. And how he tries to nullify the thesis that China is not a threat to America, but this is what the conventional wisdom is. And if you saw yesterday, I saw an article by Michael Kugelman, who's an expert on our region also, an American, Carnegie. He wrote in Outlook India. And it was totally the Indian line. I was shocked at that. Coming to the question, sir, from Preston University, I think you have a gang which is ruling India who are very, very aggressive. Ajit Doval is an expert in covert operations. He's National Security Advisor. He was head of RAW. You have Rajnath Singh. You have who's the defense minister. You have Amit Shah, who's the home minister. And then you have, I would say that's why I appreciate General Talat Masood, the thinking general. Their generals are totally, I mean, it's amazing. General Narwan and General Bipin Rawat, the language they use is so irresponsible on nuclear weapons and other things. And he, like General Narwan, who is the new Chief of Army Staff of India, he said that Nepal is using this language at the behest of somebody else. And there was an uproar because they said Nepal is doing it at the behest of China. And Nepal is a very proud country. So they are, the one weapon they're going to use against us is hybrid warfare. They did it in the past also via FATA, using Afghan territory via the NDS. The RAW did it also in Balochistan through the border. We already have their spy, Kulbhushan Yadav, with us, who came from Iran. So I think that is one thing. Our intelligence, our counterintelligence, we have to be on the guard, because that we can be vulnerable on that. Hybrid warfare, which includes psychological war, which includes information warfare, and which includes this kind of hiring terrorists and that can, be very painful for Pakistan, because we are an open and free country, free movement, and this can be. Yes, sir. You had a question, Mr. Munir, before I have to go also. At 2:30, I have another engagement.
Okay. We will also be concluding like around 2:30, 2:35, and I think you will be comfortable with it. My question is, you mentioned about the role of Russia as well in your initial talk, that they have some interest, and they also have a defense pact with China, and of course, like if there is some escalation and other, like they would come and they would see it differently. But we have seen increasing influence of India on the Arab states, UAE, Saudi, and other, and if there is some sort of misadventure in the region, where the Arab countries, UAE and other countries would be, and what would be their role?
I've also noticed another trend, that a lot of public opinion in Arab countries, and especially UAE, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, and even Saudi Arabia, who did not speak up on Kashmir, who did not speak up on Hindutva, the members of parliament, their media, they're speaking up now. And a lot of these Arab countries are very insecure, the Gulf countries, because they had a pact with America, oil for security, that they will get cheap oil from Americans will get cheap oil from these Arab countries. In return, America will give them a security.
Okay.
This pact has broken up. They don't need Arab oil anymore. They've got shale gas. And even Obama's time also, after the Arab Spring, and even now under Trump, that is over. So they're very insecure. They're looking for new patrons. I think willingly, in the end, they'll come to Pakistan. And also, you can see on the issue of Palestine and the so-called deal of the century, nobody spoke up very much. So I think that we have limited expectations, but we should have a proactive diplomacy. On Russia, why I say it's important is, for example, Iran took a principled position on Kashmir. The rebel of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, even had a pinned tweet on Kashmir for a long time. And you see, there's an Urdu word or maybe Punjabi word, chaka. Chaka means, you know, there's some you
hesitation.
Hesitation. Why are we? What is the hesitation with Moscow? We are not in the Cold War. India was part of the Cold War with the Russia, Soviet Union. We were with the American side. Then we switched also and balanced with China. But India now has gone to the American lap, and they're also buying weapons from Moscow. They have no hesitation in that. But we somehow with with Russia, with Putin, we don't have that outreach. We don't have any conflict of interest with Russia. Russia is so vital for us. And Russia is very upset that Modi has jumped into the lap of the United States. And we are not having that outreach. So our foreign policy, in my view, should be more proactive, especially with Russia, and also with smaller countries of South Asia. South Asian countries, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Maldives, these are our allies. They are natural allies, smaller countries. They are facing Indian bullying. We don't have a policy towards South Asia. I think we should have that policy. It's important. That's our natural constituency. We go to Washington, Brussels, London all the time. But what about this area, which is our natural constituency, apart from Central Asian countries? So I think we have to reorient and review our foreign policy approach vis-a-vis our South Asian neighbors, vis-a-vis the greater region. And one other mention was made, I think, that outside countries, I think China is no longer a non-Asian country. I see China as part of Greater South Asia. Greater South Asia as an geo-economic concept, which includes South Asia, the South Asian subcontinent, which includes Iran and Afghanistan, which includes Central Asian Republic, which includes, of course, Pakistan, as the hub of regional connectivity driven by economy, energy, ports, pipelines, road, and railways. And China is very much part of Greater South Asia. It's very much there. And as I said, now it's no longer a bilateral issue, it's a trilateral issue of Jammu and Kashmir. So on that note, with the permission of the chair, Mr. Munir, and with all the participants, I have to beg leave because I have to go to another webinar, which is in the offing on geopolitics. And thank you very much. It was a pleasure and delight, sir. And it was a good learning experience. And Zoon, please stay safe. You're looking, mashallah, dashing. I can feel the fire in your belly, and keep it up. And when I went to China, you looked after me very well. And you are an unofficial ambassador of Pakistan, China, solidarity and unity, mashallah. And hope to see you in Beijing. And stay safe, and God bless all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Mushahidul Sayyid Sahab, for your presence and your sharing your thoughts. I will go with another question to General Talat Masood Sahab and Dr. Samira Imran. That concluded Mushahid Sahab with this note that Pakistan has to think wider and in the context of greater South Asia, including Afghanistan and Iran and other countries, and even emphasized on relationship in Russia. I just want to why we are so much focused so narrowly on our bilateral and multilateral relationships. General Sahab.
Well, I think it's very simple to understand that, because if a country is internally not consolidated, if it internally is economically weak, it is, if it is politically unstable, and there are several issues that are confronting the government, then it does not have time to think externally. And it does not have that intrinsic power within itself to face the region with courage, with confidence. This is exactly what is happening. So I think apart from the fact that what Mushahid Hussain has said, I fully agree, but that should be the real future goal. The real present goal should be to consolidate Pakistan internally. And I think that should be the first objective of Pakistan's leadership. And that has not been happening. And the present circumstances, it is very difficult to expect that Pakistan would play a very major regional role when it is internally and neither economically, economically so dependent on others and politically so fragmented. So I think all these aspects cannot be just set aside. These have to be addressed, these have to be transformed, and then you will find that Pakistan can truly play an excellent role, considering that it also has all the geographic and strategic advantages which all our speakers have spoken about.
Okay, Dr. Samira, Pakistan has always been blamed for playing both sides. Even if we start from General Zia era, even at that time, if we go through the old files, we see General Zia was blamed for playing both sides, and even there were some consequences to it as well. Then we had political regimes, but again in the dictatorship, General Pervez Musharraf, we quote unquote call a dictator, again there was blame on Pakistan playing both sides. And what do you think, like when we are habitual to have such kind of blames, I don't know if it is realistic or made up or whatever, but in that context, our relationship with America has been so fragmented and sometimes very uneven. In the given situation now and the emerging situation, what do you think, like if we side by China with all means, as we are in the history, and we are trying to have more friendly relationships and giving more space to China, what would be the situation for Pakistan if we will be sandwiched, grilled, more?
Okay. My point is that neutrality of stance is something which has served Pakistan's interest, national interest, and will in fact serve Pakistan's national interest in the future as well. But it is in fact the circumstances which compel us towards our alignment either with either of the great powers. So it was in fact we say that it is in fact the US change of balancing as such in South Asia towards India, which compelled us to in our push in our push towards China in our alliance with in developing our alliance with China. So basically, the push factor was came from the United States when, despite the fact that it was engaged in Afghanistan, despite the fact that we were waging a war, the global war against terrorism on behalf of the US in Afghanistan, but still the parity of balancing as such, which was previously the case of the US foreign policy approach in South Asia was tilted in favor of India, which led to this this tilt. As far as the point is concerned, as to why how come we are not in a capacity to play a role within the an influential role within the South Asian ambit. Basically, as far as Pakistan was economically strong, as far as it was geographically encompassed the coastal strip from Hormuz to Malacca, and was the largest Muslim territory. It contained the largest populace as such. The South Asian states as such had enough reasons to look for balancing or what we call bandwagoning with Pakistan against India. But once we lost as a consequence of the 1971 war, Pakistan was reduced in size in terms of geography and in terms of its economic capability, which deteriorated further afterwards. I don't see as such much of an interest on the part of the South Asian states as such to align themselves with Pakistan. But we find this interest on the part of Nepal and even the Bhutanese overseers to look up to China to fill up that role. And to as a balancing role against Indian hegemony within the region. So Pakistan has also, bandwagoned with China against to counter the U.S. influence in the region, and it pays off and dividends in terms of the economic stakes as such that are involved, given the dire need of dire situation of economy. But at the same time, I would still assert and still say that as far as possible, we should see to it that our relations with China, although they are a part of a strategic partnership and it has developed over history into a strong bond of friendship, but still at the same time, we should not let go of our relations with the United States. We should not let Washington fall, fully into the let India fall fully into the.
We have to. Thank you, Dr. Sabha. We have to balance our relationship with every country because we had good ties with America, and certainly we need to have balanced relationships. And with this, Zoon, would you think like this is the last comment? Then I would go to Talasab for last comment, and then we will conclude. Zoon, do you think like BRI would definitely diffuse the American influence in the region, or like BRI is definitely is the intercontinental connectivity basically. So do you think like America has their influence in the European countries and in the Central Asia as well, and in the South Asian region, greater South Asian region as well? Do you think like a BRI as a phenomenal connectivity initiative would be able to diffuse American influence in the region?
Okay, so I think the first thing to understand from Beijing's point of view is that their mindset, for instance, when we even talk about security, Beijing thinks more about its safety rather than identifying an enemy and preparing themselves, which is something that in Washington they had first Russia, then obviously certain terrorist outfits in the region that they defined them so, and now China. So they have a certain target in mind, but China's philosophy is not to target a certain country or to target, not to look at a target, but instead to think about themselves, their growth, their safety. And in the case of the BRI, it has to do with thinking about regional economic connectivity, which will benefit them as well. So if I try to summarize what the Belt and Road vision is, it's not something that they're building, that they're creating against the United States. They did not perceive the United States as a threat, but it was the other way. And they have actually linked the Belt and Road Initiative with, for example, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I feel like in Beijing's perspective, the idea is not to diminish the America's influence, etc., but it is in fact to balance the world and to create an environment where countries can cooperate more easily, and we can benefit from, we can move away from instability. So it can perhaps reduce the US's influence in general with another emerging power that has, that can offer countries support, economic support, etc. But at the same time, I don't think that's the agenda. And this is something very important to recognize for people that are studying and observing the Belt and Road Initiative.
Okay, thank you, Zoom. General Saab, specifically, despite all aspirations from Russia, being a journalist, I know like they want to have a good relationship with Pakistan, was always like in the geopolitical situation, and forgetting like whatever Pakistan played role as the US proxy in the region. But still Pakistan, is reluctant to open its warmth and heart, and what could be the reason for it? And like if in the future scenario, what could be Pakistan and Russia's joint role into the future scenario in the region? General Saab.
Well, I think our expectations from Russia at this point of time should not be very high. I'll tell you the reason, and I think we have to understand the reality. But the reality is that Russia, despite the fact that it knows that India has aligned itself very closely with the United States, it fully understands that it is not in India's interest, and India knows that, to align itself totally with the United States. India considers itself to be also a power. It does not have to lean on another superpower or a major power to gain strength. It also has to have good relations. And historically, as you know so well, India and Russia had excellent relationship in the past, and still they maintain some very good relationship. As far as Pakistan-Russia relationship is concerned, no doubt Russia wanted a certain level of flexibility, and that is why you found that it also, and when it realized that it got so close to the Americans, it decided to sort of have a relationship with Pakistan. But at the moment, the trade relationship, there is not much to offer between the two. They must improve and increase their trade relationship. They should increase their diplomatic interactions. I fully agree with you, but I think we should create substance and not just think, loosely and say that, well, we should have good relations, because, countries' relations only develop if there is substance in it. And I think we need to have more substance in the relationship with Russia. There is a potential, I fully agree with you, but I think that potential needs to be developed and exploited so as to really benefit both the countries, and more so Pakistan.
Okay, thank you very much, General Talat Masood Sahab. With this, I would like to thank you, General Talat Masood Sahab, and Zoon Ahmed Khan from joining us from Beijing, Dr. Smira Imran, faculty member, National Defense University analyst and researcher, and Sarfraz Saab, and other participants who joined. And in the absence of Senator Mushahid Hussain Sayyid Saab, I also thank you, Mushahid Saab. He is always very kind and give us insight to the issues. It is with this, like I would like to make the final comment that escalation between India and China is not just merely an incident, and as the expert said, it would continue. And even Anwar Iqbal from Washington, D.C. said, like, it is not merely the one incident, and India would like to continue such kind of incidents with China, to engage them into conflicts, so that China could deviate, like distant from the other agenda in the region, and it would damage China's reputation. But I believe the friends of China, who are spread all over the world, all over the map and in the region, they would be taking a side, or they would be having their own stance and support to de-escalate this situation. I have spoken to one or two journalists from Nepal and Sri Lanka. Though they don't speak very bluntly like us against India, but they also have their opinion against the escalation and the aggressive tone of India at the moment. And I believe with this, the South Asian region cannot afford another Cold War. We need to, all the sensitized people and those who are in favor of peace should keep on working to de-escalate situation in the region. With this, thank you very much all. Take care of yourself, and see you next time, inshallah, with some other seminar and some other issues, some other topic. Take care of yourself. Have a nice day.
Thank you.